Hello and welcome to Bostic's Guide to everything you always wanted to know about Axis pedals but were afraid to ask. I'm going to try and cover most of the questions that get commonly asked on the various drum forums and whatnot, so let's go ahead and dive right in. First off, here's my Axis X longboard double pedal. It also has the E-kit attachments on it. Try and zoom in for it. It's kind of hard to see behind there. I'll get closer later once we start discussing that. And then we have an X longboard single with the E-kit on it, an X shortboard single, and then a regular A shortboard, and then the other A with the sonic hammer on it, and then my other X longboard. So, the main difference between the series, the A and the X, is the vary drive lever, which is right here. The X series doesn't have it. It just has the single fixed linkage. Whereas the A, what you can do is when you loosen the knob and slide it forward or backwards, it greatly adjusts the leverage of the pedal. Kind of hard to do with one hand. So just by moving this forward or back, you can change the feel of the whole pedal on the Axis A series. Now the A regular series also has, or actually the shortboard series comes with the lighter duty spring, whereas the longboards have the heavier duty spring, which is basically lets you add more tension since the footboard itself is longer. You know, if you have the smaller spring on it, it's going to feel like mush. Now what the sonic hammer does on the A series is it lets you adjust the beater attack and also lets you adjust the beater angle. Since the Axis pedals are fixed, you can only adjust the angle from right here. So there's two Allen screws right here that you loosen up, and then you can adjust the beater angle. But you can't really adjust the footboard height because it's fixed to the linkage. So by having the sonic hammer, if you loosen the screw right here, you can adjust this forward and backwards, which is basically your footboard height adjustment. And also on some setups I've seen, like if you have this all the way at the very bottom, it is possible to bottom out, where the bottom of this will hit the hoop clamp assembly. But if you have the sonic drive, the sonic hammer on here, it'll prevent that from happening. So this is kind of a personal thing. A lot of players like the sonic hammers. I myself, I just prefer the traditional beaters. The traditional beaters is either the A that comes on the A, and the X is the marksman, and then they have the larger, what they call the wrecking ball. It's basically still a hard rubber beater, it's just larger. And then Danmarks. Just so you can kind of see the size difference. The marksman's kind of small compared to a Pearl or an older style Danmark beater. I'm kind of in between. I like the marksman, and I also like the wood beaters just because it gives a nice solid punch. Now on the A's, the footboard angle is always going to be lower than the X's by default due to the nature of the vary drive lever. Since there's more mass here, it has it lower to the ground than on the X series. So if you want to have a higher footboard, but you still want to have the beater at the same angle, what you need to do is buy some of the toe risers that Axis sells. Basically just turn the pedal sideways, and you can mount the toe risers in between here to raise the height of the footboard without having to touch the beater angle. Now the X series, the footboard is already high to begin with since the drive lever is different. So I don't really have to change anything here, and the beater angle is perfect. On the X series shortboards, if you notice here, what I did is I put the footboard underneath the fixed linkage, which, that way I can lower it to get a more comfortable foot height, since the X series, the shortboard is really high by default, and I and some other players that I know have had trouble playing with it. So this is a quick little solution, is to just put the footboard underneath it and then put some screws in from behind. Let's see. And then I use a couple lock nuts there to hold it in place. Okay, so let's go over the double pedal setup right now. Basically, the double pedal setup connects the top via the C joint, and then on the bottom there's an extra piece right here. Axis provides with a couple longer screws to attach that on there, because the spring assembly goes here. So when when it's out of the box, it just looks something like this. And then here is the actual connecting rod. You use the two screws right here that go on top to attach to the primary pedal. You can see that right there. And then of course just, set it up to however far you want apart. That's set, and that's controlled by the 3 bolts right here. You just loosen the Allen wrenches and then, pull it farther apart so you get to the desired angle. Now setting the beater angle is a bit tricky because since this is round and not, octagon or hexagon shaped on most double pedals, you first have to set the beater angle on this piece right here, which is the same as like I said before. You loosen the 2 screws and then, set the angle and tighten it. Then once you place this on, you'll have to adjust the footboard height to how you want it. So I usually just get a ruler and, see how big it is here and measure it to where it is right here. And without, moving it, tighten up these 3 bolts. Otherwise, since it's round, it's going to slip, and then you'll have a lower footboard on your slave side, which is, pretty annoying. Okay, let's go over the E-kit triggers now. So what the E-kits allow you to do is actually trigger from the pedal itself without having to have a hoop-mounted trigger on your bass drums. It's basically 2 pieces. It's the little detonator, and then the actual trigger itself, which is held on by the 2 screws. If you've wondered what those 2 holes are there for, that's for mounting the actual trigger unit. So you have to take off this piece right here, which holds the spring. Loosen the 2 Allen screws, it slips off. Then you place on the little detonator, and then tighten it up. You want to make sure there's a space there so nothing is rubbing. And then you place back on, the piece that holds the spring assembly. Now, of course, then you have to readjust your beater angle again, which is, not the easiest thing to do on the fly, because when you tighten one and you have the angle set, when you tighten the other, all of a sudden this will slip a little bit. So it's just something to keep in mind, that it's changing the beater angle on Axis pedals is not always all that fun to do. So once you have this set up, then you just adjust it so this little detonator hits the trigger when the bass drum mallet hits the bass drum. So you can hear the clicking sound there. And this is a lot more convenient than having hoop-mounted triggers, because then you don't have to stuff the bass drums with foam in order for them to not false trigger, because there's no way for this thing to false trigger. They even supply little pieces of rubber that go in between here to help isolate that and keep that from even happening.